I just showed up to Thanksgiving one year with hickeys on my neck. Thank God you're here, because today we're going to talk to you about all the things that are perfectly normal to do in Denmark, but would have Americans clutching their pearls with their jaws on the ground and saying, y'all need Jesus.
And if you're new to our channel, he's Derek, I'm Mike, and we're the Rogue Trading Guys. We're an American couple. We moved to Denmark from Philadelphia in 2017. And now if you come on our channel, you can see videos about our experiences here and what it's like living in Denmark.
That's right. And before we get started, let's take a look at our legal disclosure for this week.
The following is a fun and sometimes factual video. Rogue Trading does not assume that all Americans are prude, overbearing, and easily offended, or that all Danes are crass, drunk, and possibly naked while their babies sit outside. If these broad generalizations and stereotypes cause anger for more than 2 minutes, just remember that Derek and Mike love you, even though we're not your real dads.
Well, then let's get to it. So the first thing on our list is one of the most cliche things that you hear about Denmark. And if you look at any blogs or if you read anything that's written on the topic of what weird things they do in Denmark, you're going to see that people leave their babies outside. And even though it's cliche, we just had to throw it on. We'll put it on first and get it over with. But it's absolutely true. It's very common to walk down the street in Denmark, or even in your own courtyard in your building, and, well, see a baby left unattended in a baby buggy or a stroller.
Yeah, that's right. All the time we'll come home and see 1 or 2 baby buggies sitting outside of our door, and we're never sure if there's a baby in there or not. Sometimes there is, and sometimes they just didn't feel like taking the buggy back inside. And we think it's kind of weird, even though people explain it to us, and it does make sense. I mean, why would you want to wake up the baby if they're sleeping in there? And if you're going into a boutique, they're usually pretty small, and the baby buggies are huge, so they're not going to fit. But still, like, our little American sensibilities still find it super weird that you have babies sitting outside in a buggy.
And maybe this says something about America too, because, well, it's a little bit safer in Denmark and there's a bit more of a community feeling. So there are things that maybe you would do in Denmark that you wouldn't want to do in the US, like leave your baby sleeping in the street, but it's perfectly okay to do here. And we've also read and heard people tell us, I don't know if it's true and I haven't fact checked this, so maybe you guys can help us out, but we've heard that it actually benefits the baby's lungs to give it some cold air. That's why they do it, and you know, it just wouldn't necessarily be something you would see often in the US. I think there's even a story about a mother having the police called on her. A Danish woman that was raising her baby in New York City had the police called on her because she left the baby outside in a stroller. So, not in America. And the next thing we're going to talk about that is totally normal in Denmark and a little more weird in the United States is divorce. And as a child of divorce, I actually find it very nice how they do things in Denmark. It's just a lot more common and it's just part of life. It's not really something that's looked at in a way of shame. And I think part of that is because we don't have as much societal guilt around people divorcing. In fact, one of the princes divorced, and his now ex-wife actually stayed in the royal palace raising their children for months until she was able to get her life situated. And that's how most families in Denmark handle things. You see, they can take the fact that a couple is splitting up and it doesn't necessarily impact the family unit, and they still get together for holidays and they celebrate traditions because those things are more important than the relationship between only 2 people.
Yeah, and what's funny is as common as it is to talk about divorce or have it in open society, the divorce rate in Denmark is really no higher than it is back in the United States. So it's more just a matter of the way the society handles it and is comfortable talking about it. And it's funny because Danes, if anything, are completely practical people. And so if they want to be in a relationship, they'll be in a relationship. And if they don't want to be in a relationship, then they won't be in a relationship. So it's all very sensible in how they handle things. And I think it helps too that you don't have that underlying kind of religiosity and guilt that's kind of underlying a lot of these sorts of things back in the US. That if people feel like they don't want to be part of something because it's not beneficial for them anymore, the sensible thing to do is to split.
Yep, and the great thing about Danish society is that it makes it very easy because you don't have to stay in bad relationships or with toxic people like often does happen in the United States. And this will happen because they don't want to leave because it would affect their economic stability, their healthcare stability, their housing stability, and all of these things can force people into staying in relationships that aren't healthy for them or their children. And in Denmark, it's just a much more healthy system. So yay, divorce. By the way.
Another thing that would be a little bit weird in the US, but it's totally normal here in Denmark, is Danish humor. And it comes with one color, dark. Danish humor tends to be sarcastic and ironic, and it's a really important part of Danish society. So, for example, Danes like to use humor as a way to kind of keep people in line and to knock people down a peg if their heads are getting a little bit too big. It's also a good way to know that you're part of a group. It's a very big deal. I'm part of a friend group to be able to take and give jokes. So if people are joking with you, that actually means they like you, ironically.
Exactly, and that's one reason that I personally love the humor here, and I like kind of having that banter and back and forth with our Danish friends, because I always say, if I'm making fun of you, don't worry about it. What you should worry about is if I stop making fun of you, because that shows me that you can't take a joke. And that's kind of the mentality of Danish humor. So Danish humor is basically intended to give a rise, maybe push boundaries a little bit, and sometimes it can even tiptoe on the offensive. And that's very different than American humor, which is usually built on puns and wordplay, and it's a little too cutesy, and it's totally intended not to be offensive. Sometimes even a little, should I say it, politically correct. So in Denmark, it's a little bit refreshing to have the kind of humor where everybody's just a little bit darker and a little bit more inappropriate. But I like it.
Maybe one example we can give that's not so crude or crass that we can't put it on YouTube is, so Derek, have you ever been punished before?
No, only after.
Another thing that would make Americans go crazy, but it's totally normal here in Denmark, is that kids seem to run around wild. I mean, when you go around town, you'll see on the public transit or on bikes or just even walking around town, you'll see kids even as young as 8, 9 years old going around the city completely unaccompanied by an adult. And I have to say, even though we don't have kids, we can't imagine what it's like being an American parent coming over to Denmark with kids. It has to make all of your instincts just go haywire.
That's right. And since we don't have kids or want them, we can't tell you too much about what it's like to be a parent of a child in Denmark. But friends of ours, the Young family, have an awesome YouTube channel called Traveling Young. And they recently did a video on what it's like to parent in Denmark as Americans. And we'll link to that video in the comments below so you can check out their channel. If you like ours, I'm telling you, you'll love their channel. And it's a very informative video. One thing that they did share there is that it seems like Denmark, the parents here have a lot more trust in their kids. And like Mike mentioned, they trust them to take public transportation. They trust them to play kind of unaccompanied on playgrounds and to climb up different things. We were having a couple beers in a park the other day and saw these kids like just climbing way too high for my comfortability. I mean, I wasn't putting my beer down to check on them, but that's just kind of a normal thing here. You don't have that helicopter parenting that a lot of people are used to in the US. And it's a bit nice to see. It kind of reminds me of how parents were when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s, where you just kind of let your kid go and hope for the best, and that's how they learn. And that seems to be the attitude in Denmark, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think part of it comes from the Danish education system too. I mean, one of the interesting things is compared to a lot of other Western countries, Danish children really learn like school skills much later than they do elsewhere. And the reason is because they focus on more social skills. The idea is that they're going to teach you how to be able to sit still, or what it's like to actually go into a store and behave yourself, or go on the bus or on public transit. So you learn these life skills at a young age before you worry about learning your ABCs and 1, 2, 3s.
Okay, so another thing that can definitely make Americans a little bit uncomfortable while they're in Denmark is the amount of swearing that you'll hear. And this can be Danish swearing, but it's especially noticeable for us English speakers when we hear American or British English language curse words in general. And we covered this in a recent video called 9 Things Danes Say That May Sound Rude But Are Totally Harmless. And it's an apt title because this is totally harmless. We even learned a bit more about why this happens to be. And part of it is because, well, Danes are just much more comfortable with American curse words, and they give a little more flavor to the language. There's just something nice about having and adding that to any sentence that you have. And it's a great word, so Danes use it, along with some other curse words too.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that surprised us right when we got here, when you'd be on the bus or on the metro and you'd see a bunch of kids get on and start talking Danish, and then all the time. And nobody would care what they were saying. Grandma was sitting over on the side. She didn't even care what was happening. Same thing happened at work, where people would pepper conversations during meetings with and nobody really cared about it. In some ways, they kind of use English curse words the same way that we might say heck or darn, I guess, back in the States. It's just a way to spice things up, and they're not really that offensive because in truth, it's not their curse word. It's an English curse word, not a Danish curse word.
Yeah, and again, it's just something that is much more laid back. Some other people brought up to us the fact that there's not as much of a religious culture here, so the idea of having to be constantly moral to get into heaven just doesn't really permeate Danish society. Even though some people are religious, it's more something that they keep personal. So they don't use it like Americans can do as a way to judge people. So cursing on television is not really that big of a deal, and having a code of words that you can't say in a Hollywood movie just doesn't really make sense to Danes. And it's actually kind of nice to hear somebody at work say like, yeah, because when you're excited, you just want to say it. Let's talk about sex, baby.
Now, we know it's totally cliche that Europeans are so much more comfortable than Puritan Americans when it comes to sex and nudity, but even we were surprised by how big the difference was when we moved over here. I mean, it's common to see buses with boobs on the side for advertisements, or go for a run and see naked people jumping in the harbor or changing clothes in the open with not a care in the world.
Yeah, and as nice as that can be sometimes, it is still a little shocking to realize just how open the Danish society is with sex and nudity. For example, there's even been shows where kids have a cartoon character that has a penis that can grow to several meters long and expand to do common things like around the house. And it's a bit different, and I think Americans would be pretty shocked to see that. There's even another program that's designed for kids where they are actually confronted with adults in the nude. I'm even a little uncomfortable talking about this, which is weird. But they're even standing in front of adults that are in the nude, and the children ask them questions about their bodies, and they answer quite honestly. But when you think about it, it's actually really refreshing that as a society, you want your kids to know about their body parts, especially before they start changing. I mean, did your parents ever have the talk with you? Yeah, like I didn't have any conversation with my parents about my body or sex or anything. I just showed up to Thanksgiving one year with hickeys on my neck, and they just assumed that it was too late. Anyway, yeah, it's just cool that it's so open here. And even though it was a bit of a shock for us at first, and a lot of Americans would be a little bit taken aback by it, it's really refreshing in my opinion.
And in general, Danes just tend to be a lot more comfortable about sex. I mean, we come from a big city with open-minded friends, but even we're shocked by how people talk about all their sexual experiences with different partners they've had, three-ways and sex clubs and public sex and all kinds of things like that. Nothing is taboo in Denmark when it comes to sex.
Now, the next thing that's completely normal in Denmark, but a little frowned upon in the United States, is something we know quite well, and that's public intoxication. Yes, it's very normal in Denmark to drink wherever you want, however much you want, and alcohol is just generally tolerated, no pun intended, more than it is in the United States. In general, the social acceptability of drinking is just higher in Denmark than it is anywhere in America. For one, the drinking age isn't 21, which seems incredibly oppressive when you really think about it. And there isn't really a drinking age at all in Denmark. If your parents want to give you a beer or wine or anything to drink, they can. You just can't buy alcohol until age 16 and liquor until age 18. So it's very common to see even teenagers sitting in the park, drinking beer and getting absolutely canned any day of the week. In fact, we used to live near one of the hot spots for that.
Yeah, we know this really well because our old apartment used to be across from Nudity Station, which is one of the biggest and busiest train stations in Copenhagen, linking to all the suburban rail networks. And every single weekend we would come home from being out with our friends, responsibly, and we would see kids all over the place. I'm saying kids, these are teenagers, barely, drunk as anything around Nordport Station, waiting for their once-an-hour train to come to go back to their parents' home. And then in the morning, you'd go walk around there and vomit everywhere. And in truth, it wasn't just the kids. You'd walk around there and there'd be plenty of very respectable-looking adults who were quite wasted walking around, waiting to get their train home as well.
One of the biggest examples of how Danes like to drink almost to the point of irresponsibility, but not quite, is the annual julefrokost or Christmas lunch. And this is a work Christmas party where you're actually encouraged to get absolutely hammered and let loose in front of your entire company. And I know that that kind of thing you hear about maybe happening in America, but it's the rule in Denmark. You pretty much have to get hammered and everybody makes sure that you do. In fact, there's no cell phones allowed that night. No significant others or spouses are allowed to attend the Julefrokost. And, well, let's just say that what happens at Julefrokost stays in Julefrokost. But it's a great example of just how much drinking is celebrated in a bit of a weird way in Denmark, but we love it. And speaking of which, we're gonna close with a Mikkeller Japanese rice lager. Please make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to our channel so you can get more content every time it comes out, and hit the bell to be notified when we drop new videos on Thursdays.
And make sure you leave some comments below telling us how much you liked the video or what we got wrong so we get it right next time.
And let's see how it tastes. It's good.
It's good.
Yeah.
I like this one.
Skål.
Skål.
A, B, C.
Easy as eating toe
No,
tray.
no. No, Mike, you always take it too far.
1 second.
Hey, what?
Thank you.